Just back from IT Nation Secure 2025 and right outside of Orlando. It was a great event. Many vendors, many MSPs, just focused on security. The keynote kicked off and there was 4 people up on stage, a panel, and they were from different companies, not just ConnectWise. ConnectWise is trying to make this community, not just what they offer, but with others as well. But the vendor hall was full. There was lots of great vendors. I was able to have 16 conversations with great guests right there at the resort. I had great guests, great guests. First started with Gene Templin, MSP Sales Reimagined. Gene's in the Pitch It program, the ConnectWise, it's not new, but new for this year, incubator program. Jamie Williams, my friend from a long time ago, marketing before sales. MSPs, are you listening? Oh, Ricardo from Lumu. Yes, my fellow aviator. I've known Ricardo for a couple of years now, and great conversation. Ricardo. Oh, Rayanne, of course, Rayanne from ABC. The name of the episode is From Cables to Closing. Fascinating backstory to Rayanne and what she does now, also in the Pitch It program. Mike Estep from Blackpoint Cyber. Great story from MSP to vendor now. Blackpoint's a great security company, and it was a great conversation with Mike. Mark Balanov, first time I met Mark, really great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Talking about cyber lessons. David Chernitsky, fascinating background from Russia to Israel to Canada to what he knows about the martial arts and everything he learned from the best people in cybersecurity there in Israel. Great conversation. David, Matt Holland, first time I met Matt, great conversation from Spy Tech to MSP Simplicity. Tanner Cookson, fascinating from great company. MSPs getting paid quickly. We talked about rowing, riding, and revenue. Tim Weber, cybersecurity firm now. He's a volunteer firefighter in Connecticut, my home state. Joel Cahill, great conversation with Joel. I've known Joel for quite a while now. First time we ever sat and talked like this. The episode's Cold Plunges, Hot Takes, and Cyber Strategy. But great conversation with Joel. Paul Lupo from Bitdefender. Paul's been around for quite a while, and he has great stories and great insight on the great company that Bitdefender is. David Rasapor from ConnectWise, new CPO. Wonderful insights from David, his background in Iran, and David is just a true engineer. Ozzy Saeed from Compliance, he actually helped write the specs to CMMC. Fascinating conversation with Ozzy and the saltwater fish tanks as well, one of his great hobbies. Sarvash Rao, of course, I've known Sarvash for a couple of months now, really focusing on MSPs, helping those SMBs with his with the security platform. And of course, ended with Matthew Benazari. Great conversation about, started with climbing. He's a great climber, about cyber fires and MSP fortitude there at Arete, and great conversation. Thanks all for being part of this, and thanks everyone for listening and watching.
Hi, I'm Joey Pinz, and here's my 45-second introduction. After starting my business in the 90s, I started developing poor habits of eating in my diet because of working way too much. I found myself at 340 pounds. The doctor told me if I don't lose the weight, I'm not going to see my daughter graduate. I took the next 7 months, lost 130 pounds. People ask me, how'd you do it? What's the secret? I need to lose weight. How'd you do it? How did I lose the weight? Just one word: discipline. I've had other successes in life, and I attribute them all to discipline. Now, I'm not the king of discipline, but I believe that it can help all of us. Friends convinced me to start a podcast. The podcast mission: how do we better ourselves and society? I talk to interesting people in health, fitness, sport, wellness, business, technology, science, art, and culture. And I eventually ask them how discipline plays a role in their life. Podcast vision: growth through learning from others.
Now, did you go to UConn?
I did.
Yeah. So you've been a UConn fan. Come fistful.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've
you follow all sports there now?
pretty much men's and women's basketball. And even then, I didn't follow the men's basketball when they sucked for a while. But I picked it back up. I was there during the Dream season. So when they
Elamine?
No, before that. So when they beat Clemson on the shot.
Oh yeah.
And then they lost to Christian Laettner. I still hate Christian Laettner.
Christian Laettner, yeah.
And all things Duke. So I didn't see a tournament win, but back then them making the Elite Eight was a gigantic deal.
Pretty big, yeah. Talk to me about being a volunteer fireman.
Yeah,
Tim.
yeah.
I mean,
so So that's something that something I grew up with. So my father was a volunteer firefighter. So I started when I was 14. The town I was in had a cadet program. So I did that I was a cadet for 4 years and a regular member for 7 till I moved out. And then when I told my wife, my now wife, when we purchased a house, we were looking for houses. I said that was one of the requirements for me was the town had to have a volunteer department. So we settled in. We're up Granby, Connecticut, up on the Mass border, and I joined that department back in '98, and I've been an officer since '07, and I'm assistant chief right now. So it's a lot of things to me. It's giving back to others, and helping people on what's potentially the worst day of their lives.
Yeah.
It's also an adrenaline rush, going into a burning building, driving with lights and sirens. The irony is I hate heights, so I don't like ladders, which becomes really funny because I also teach at the local fire academy, and I'm always testing people on ladders because I don't actually train them on it. So there's just kind of a weird dichotomy with that. But yeah, it's something that's really important to me. So
define for me the culture of a dedicated workforce like this that doesn't get compensated financially.
It's an interesting, if not twisted, mindset in some ways, because we're volunteering to stop everything in our lives to go out and help our fellow neighbor.
Right.
And we do. And that's one of the things that I take very seriously as a chief officer is I have to make decisions that put people in harm's way. And it's I equate being an officer in the fire department as like being a parent of a whole bunch more kids, because that's how I look at it. Not in a derogatory way, but those people are my responsibility. So it's but there's a calling, there's a brotherhood. I mean, there's a lot of different terms to do it, but it's a community. I mean, and you see that. You see a lot of volunteer organizations have it. I mean, the challenge that we have in the fire service is the challenge that all volunteer organizations have now, which is membership.
Right.
You're no longer kind of the sole, one breadwinner, and kind of the timing and things like that, and people working multiple jobs and this, that, and the other thing. So, one of the biggest challenges we have in the fire service is just keeping up people wise.
Right.
So,
can one be fired from volunteer?
Yeah.
You can be.
Yeah. Takes a lot, but I mean, in the end, we have to have standards.
Right.
And that's, I haven't seen it often. But we had somebody that had a couple years ago that was doing some issues with misconduct. We had to, as an organization, we had to actually protect the organization.
Wow.
So a lot of times people that aren't going to work self-select out, but we also have to be on the lookout for people that create fires to then go put them out.
Right.
I've never experienced that, but there's a pending investigation on the shoreline in Connecticut there's a thought of a volunteer fire chief that was actually lighting brush fires this spring. So
And how does one prove that? What's the evidence?
So proving something's arson and proving who did it are two very, very different things. So it's I haven't been trained as a fire marshal, but I've certainly been around enough fires that there's a lot of science involved in it, and there's a lot of things that they can determine by burn patterns and things like that. It's also a lot of personal observation. So for example, if we have a fire in town, of significance, we will have our fire marshal come out for it, and one of the first things that he will do is he'll interview the first arriving firefighters or officers. Tell me what you saw. Where was the fire coming from? Who was a lot of different things that kind of start to potentially paint out a picture. So.
And does the force have to regularly take class, not just on firefighting, but I mean on DEI, not really DEI, but more like
there's soft skill stuff. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, training's a big component of firefighting, and it's also one of the reasons why we're, going back to the membership, why we're struggling. Is there's a firefighter is not just a firefighter anymore. We don't do EMS as part of our organization. But we certainly do things like hazardous materials and stuff like that. So the amount of training that a firefighter has to go through, and then there are the soft skills, harassment training, all of those different things that aren't exciting, but you have to do that as part of any. I mean, that's actually state law for us in Connecticut. So.
Wow. So we're here at IT Nation, ConnectWise, Secure in Orlando. What are some of your goals this week, Tim?
So for me, Secure's become about just about making connections. Ironically, the more I've been doing this is I think this is the 6th Secure event, so this is my 5th event. I didn't go to the first one actually, I don't even know the first one was, I think the first one was virtual because that was a COVID year. For me, it's about connecting with people. So I don't go to a lot of sessions. I present frequently, so I just, speaking with you today, coming out of a panel discussion I did on incident response tabletops. But I look forward to this week to connecting with my peers, learning about new vendors, new providers, solution providers, and then also the ConnectWise team. ConnectWise does a good job of having all of the people that are significant in the organization here, and it's still I think it's a great event. The ConnectWise team does a great job putting on the event. The content's good. I really like what Matt Hopper and the team are doing this year with a little bit more structure because it's gotten a little bit basic over the years, in my opinion. So I see the direction they're moving, and it's exciting. So,
what is it about security that attracts you? Come a little closer.
Yeah, sorry. So for me, I started out, my career as a traditional MSP. So, I did 28 years of just, fixing PCs, driving all over New England, this, that, loaded Microsoft Office with floppy disks, all 26 of them type thing. But security was always interesting to me because of the challenge of it. I also come from a law enforcement family, so my father's a retired federal agent, my brother's a detective. I got other folks in it, wow. And to me that was always intriguing. So in 2018, our MSP, one of our CEOs, asked me to stand up a security practice because security had always been kind of part of our infrastructure services. So, I took on that challenge, and we built a $2.5 million business within the MSP in about 3 years.
Wow.
Always with the intention of that becoming its own standalone business. So.
And you're attracted to it because it's in your family.
It's also a lot of the same things that make me want to be a firefighter.
Right.
It's the same thing. It's helping people.
Interesting.
It's sitting across from people, trying to help them prevent the bad things from happening, and if the bad thing does happen, help them get through it. So,
when MSPs are selecting a partner, a vendor to go with, especially in security, what kind of questions should they be asking?
I think it starts with what's your approach, what are your credentials. Those are two of the biggest ones. What do you see as the MSSP? What do you see as important? What do you tend to focus on? We're starting to see more MSPs reach out to us and others like us that are dedicated MSSPs because they recognize kind of the limits of their own capabilities. You can kind of fake your way through a lot of things in the MSP space, but if you do that in the security world, you put yourself in some not insignificant peril. Because of the nature of what you're working with and the potential impacts of getting it wrong. So a lot of times, we at Cyber74 partner. We have a lot of MSPs that reach out to us, and a lot of them just want to know how we do things, how we approach it, how we're going to work with them. Because obviously, for an MSP to bring in somebody from the outside to evaluate their client systems is it's a little scary.
Yeah.
Because you want to do right by the client, but you don't want to make yourself look bad in the process. So we go out of our way. For us, integrity is one of our core values. So we're always going to show it and report it as we see it, but we're going to do so in such a way where it's not harmful to the MSP. We do it in parallel. We review things with them, and we give them a chance to start correcting things, kind of as they go through it. So then this way, when we end up doing that report and going through it, they can say, yeah, Cyber74 had told us about this, but we've already taken steps to make it. Because in the end, some clients want to hang people out to dry, but most of them they want to be secure.
Right.
That's it. They don't care about how they get there. They just want to know that they're okay. So.
And you've got an inside track because you were an MSP for a long
Correct.
time. Yeah, so it definitely helps. Gives you a big advantage.
Yeah, I've been in their shoes.
Yeah.
I've been in their shoes. I understand how it is, and And one of the things is I believe in what we're doing. And I believe in what we're doing is very, very important. One of the things that we're seeing a change now, but the SMBs have been underserved by the security market for a long time. Because the big companies went to where the dollars were, and we've seen a change in the last 5 years, which has been good because depending on whose statistic you believe, anywhere between 45 and 70% of attacks are against small businesses. I've seen it. I've seen, the smallest organization I've seen get hit with a cyber attack was a sole proprietor.
Wow.
A wealth manager who, sounds small, but he's managing $40 million in assets. He got hit. So it's not. There's sometimes this fallacy in the world that these things only happen to the big companies, and nothing could be further from the truth. Those are just the ones that make the news. And anytime I do a lot of public speaking, a lot of education around security is I tell people that for every one event you hear, there's 150, 200, 250 security events that are happening that they don't make the news because they don't, there's no, unless somebody has a legal or a regulatory obligation to share that they've been through an event, there is no upside for them sharing that. There's just nothing good comes from that. So,
Tim, what should vendors do to be better partners to MSPs?
They got to put themselves. So they got to put themselves in the shoes of the MSPs and be able to explain why is something important. We have a challenge in this business where everything's about the tools, and the reality is that people don't get hit because they don't have this one last tool in place. It's because they're not meeting the basics, and we get fascinated with the new shiny red ball and things like that, which is understandable, and that's how businesses make their money. But the more you can kind of step back and look at what's a problem that we're trying to fix, and that's a lot of times. I've determined that I could literally spend my entire job just going to conferences and then talking to vendors afterwards. Like I could
Coaching
make that
them?
No, just taking their calls. But being able to articulate what is it that you're trying to fix for the organizations, and how are you going to partner with the MSP? The organizations that I see most successful in the channel have incredibly tight relationships with the MSPs, and it's partnership. It's not about selling SKUs or selling products or calling at the end of the quarter to see if they can get. We all have our numbers and our targets and things like that, but be genuine. The organizations that are genuine, that shines through that is like a light on a hill. So,
Tim, has there been anything in the last month or so you changed your mind on?
How so?
Anything? Small, large, anything you changed your mind on in the last month?
I'm a pretty big consumer of the news, so I try to look at things from all different sides without getting political. So, I see probably one of the biggest challenges is just figuring out where to get the best set of the best unbiased set of information, and I've determined that it's actually not possible. I don't know. Nothing. That's an interesting question. Nothing jumps to mind. So,
do you find you change your mind often? Seldom?
I'd say frequently. I do based off information. I like to try and stay humble and recognize that the input from others. You have to have your beliefs. You have to believe what you believe in and believe in it strongly. But if you surround yourself with experts, sometimes you can learn stuff that that can absolutely rock your world. Right. So, and I'm fortunate that I have that both at Cyber 74 as well as in my fire department, that I got people that I work with that are smarter than I am, and I learn from them all day long. It's one of the reasons why I like to teach. I teach at our local fire academy because I learn from the students. And I think the moment that you stop learning is the moment you really start to die. You have to be a student. You have to kind of keep moving things forward. And I come out of these conferences energized for that reason.
Yeah, so do I.
It's a whole list of things. I mean, again, I sat in a session this morning and it was all about sales. And my takeaway was something called the 100-hour challenge. Never heard of it before, but wrote it down. I'm going to go back and look at it because it's like, oh, that's intriguing to me.
So I think you know my story. I think I mentioned it before. I started with MSP in 90 right there in New Haven. and was working 14, 16-hour days. Yeah. You're no stranger to this. So I'm in front of the doctor, and she tells me I'm at 340 pounds. She says, if you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see your daughter graduate. She knew how to rock me.
That's awesome.
So I spent the next 6-7 months, lost about 120 pounds, kept it off. So when I tell people the story, what's your secret? There's no secret. Discipline. Yeah. That's how I did it. Focus, willpower. How does discipline play a role in your life, Tim?
So it's probably one of the areas for me that's a challenge. Ironically, I'm married to a cardiac nurse, so my own level of fitness is a topic that doesn't come up infrequently.
Interesting.
To me, it's how you grow. When I look at where I've gotten to in my life, both professionally and personally, it's been because I've had a plan, I've had a path, and I've stuck to it. I hope to be the actual chief of my volunteer fire department at some point, and I've been on a very deliberate plan and path for that for the last 15 years.
Wow.
And it's something that I've pushed for. So you have to want it, and I think that's kudos to your doctor for putting it in such black and white terms, because that's a challenge that we actually have in the healthcare. I mean, I can give you stories that my wife's told, which is they can't tell people some of those things, because it's about patient care satisfaction, and because that drives their Medicare reimbursements, and as a result, you end up doing people a disservice. So, there's some areas in my life, that I need to grow some more discipline in.
Yeah.
Certainly fitness is one of them, but yeah, I absolutely see the role of it. I think it's played a role in my success over the years.
But I mean, to have Cyber 74, to be a volunteer fireman, I mean, you have to have routine, you have to have structure. I mean, there's lots of discipline.
There's a lot of habit. Well, and it's funny because I tend to look at myself for the areas that I'm not working on. And it's
you're hard on yourself.
That's probably because I went to Catholic school for 4 years.
Guilt.
So exactly. But yeah, it's.
Where'd you go to Xavier?
He's Catholic in Manchester.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. But we all have our things to work on. We all have our crosses to bear. But it's. You also have to make sure you're having fun along the way. That's probably one of the things that, much like you, I wrapped my identity around my job for a long time, and I sometimes let the fluctuations of the job and fluctuations of different leaders I work for at different times impact my own self-worth. And I still remember kind of a breakthrough moment of working with an executive coach who, I remember everything about this moment almost to the minute.
Really?
Who told me, Tim, you've got yourself so wrapped up in what this person thinks of you. This person's never happy with anything. Why do you think they're going to ever be happy with what you do? And you could have. Remember, it was like 11:40 on a Friday morning. Like in the early summer. You could have knocked me over with a feather that day. That was a life-changing moment for me. And it was probably a throwaway comment from this guy, but it was one of those things where, sometimes you need to get knocked upside the head with things to see it. But you sometimes learn that life is short, and you sometimes have to learn that the hard way. I lost my mother, earlier this year, and she'd been sick for a while. It wasn't a surprise, but it was still rough. And you can't take anything for granted. And also, you can't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah.
I find the times where I'm probably struggling the most is I get so wrapped up in myself and taking myself way more seriously than I should that, unfortunately, I've got friends and colleagues who are good at, and a spouse who's good at kind of making fun of me and using sarcasm, as a way to kind of bring me down a peg when I need to be. So
need friends like that.
Yeah, you do. You need balance in life, and you need people to tell you when you're doing it right, and importantly, when you maybe need to look at something from a different perspective. So,
what motivates you, Tim?
I like to help people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a people pleaser in my very nature. I kind of equate myself to being like a German Shepherd. Where I want to make people happy. I'm generally an optimist. Which is funny because my wife is a pessimist, so I think we balance each other off well. As is the president of my company, he's a pessimist as well. So I think we really kind of even ourselves out. I consider myself lucky. I've got a great spouse, 3 wonderful kids. I've got stuff that I love to do. I work for a wonderful company. Not just Cyber 74, but Cyber 74 is part of New Charter Technologies, and I'm very close with some of the executive leadership team. Chris Louise, COO, he's the one who hired me at AdNet back in the mid 90s, which is still crazy to say. Peter Melby, the CEO as of last year. And it's good people wanting to do good things. And that feels good. It's funny because, I'm at an age where retirement's maybe in sight.
Right.
And, and my wife brings it up because she's got a very high stress job, and if she could retire tomorrow, she would. And to me, I love what I'm doing. I have no interest or desire to stop. Right. Yeah, sometimes the travel wears me down, and certainly there's bad days like any job has. But yeah, I don't know. I consider myself really fortunate.
So given that motivation, helping people, impact, how do you measure success?
Measure success. I don't know. I try to look around and see did I make things better or worse for people? Am I making it better? And that's probably one of the reasons why I like being a firefighter so much is I get to see the impact on the community, and it's also why I love events like this.
Yeah.
I get asked to speak all the time, and I love to do it because I've gotten so much out of the MSP community over the years, through Evolve and this, that, and the other thing, that if I can share anything I've learned. And I'll tell you, one of the things that jazzes me is when, I do a panel or something like that, and somebody comes up to me, maybe not right after it, but somebody at a future event says, hey, I listened to you speak last year, and I took some of that back, and it was really helpful to me. Like that just, I don't know, it's kind of fuel for the soul. So
that's a wonderful sentiment. Tim, thanks so much for your time.
Yeah,
Anybody want to contact you, how can they get in touch with you?
So best way is to hit us up through our website, cyber74.com. We've got a form on there. Or also hit me up on LinkedIn. I love making connections with people. I love to talk people's ear off about security.
Yeah.
So.
Tim Weber, Weber. Make sure to put it in the show notes.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Appreciate
Tim.
it.
Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypinz.com. There you'll find lots of resources, and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinz Discipline Conversations.